My first year of college was a real challenge for me. I'm extremely introverted, and while I do have friends that I spend time with, I don't make friends easily. I'm simply too shy to approach others, and I'm no good at connecting with strangers. It's just who I am, and I'm okay with that. When I started classes that fall, I was the invisible girl. I never called attention to myself if I could help it. You know the type, I'm sure. There are a lot of people who specialize in invisibility. So, I didn't have a lot of friends that semester, just people I would call acquaintances. We got along fine, but couldn't really be called friends. Now, at this time, I was battling my own demons too. When I was 16, I was brutally, and by no means was I over it. It was a major factor in my life. I went to therapy regularly and was treated for major depression, extreme anxiety disorder, and PTSD. I was walking a thin line trying to pull myself together and get on with life while at the same time feeling really isolated and therefore vulnerable around others. I avoided men whenever I could, simply because I wasn't ready to let my guard down, and it was exhausting being on constant high alert. I was also rather paranoid. It's impossible to avoid potentially dangerous, to my paranoid mind, situations when living on campus and being the loner that I was. There were times when I simply had to walk back to my dorm in the dark or participate in a group project with men, etc. I worked hard on my self-confidence, and while I eventually overcame my fears, at that time I was always on edge. I'm sure you can understand why. One day, I went to class in the humanities building. It wasn't a big deal, but the classroom was on the top floor of a tall building, and I usually rode the elevator. The elevator was slow as hell, but still better than walking up 12 flights of stairs. I get to the building, call the elevator, and wait. To my surprise, when the doors opened, I was the only one who got in. This was a relief because of my paranoia. But then, it happened. The doors were closing when someone stuck a hand in the middle and 4 guys got in. This wasn't good for me. My anxiety hit the roof and I backed myself into a corner so I felt somewhat safer. I kept telling myself that I was perfectly safe, that these men weren't going to hurt me and that I should just relax. But then, one of the bastards turned to me, grinned maliciously and said,
"There's only one girl in here. Let's get her."
And all shit broke out. When he made that comment, I panicked. I had my book bag, full to bursting with heavy books, on the ground in front of me. In my terror, I picked it up and started swinging. When the doors finally opened, there were 4 very surprised men, either on the ground or huddling away from me while I stood in the middle, hyperventilating and still swinging. I have never seen anyone exit an elevator that fast, and I'm not talking about me. Those guys actually stumbled over each other, trying to get away from me. It took me a long time to calm down, but in the end, it was a huge step in rebuilding my confidence. I'd been in a potentially dangerous position with 4 men, and I defended myself quite effectively. That was the beginning of reclaiming myself. This literally just happened. I'm on my mobile right now typing it, so please forgive my spelling and formatting errors. For context, I'm a tiny 4'10", 160-70 lady. I'm a mother, and I personally have quite a few years of working with or interacting with unsavory characters who are sometimes violent. So this is to say that I actually work best under pressure. I also have real bad social anxiety, so I'm always on high alert. So I roll up to Walmart, and my husband's grandmother is watching the baby at home because I need to grab some things for the baby. I get to my car, go about my business with collecting the diapers, wipes, and new pack of pacifiers, etc. After my serious shopping ends, I wander to the female aisle, where hygiene products for ladies are kept. I see a very awkward-looking gal looking at boxes of pads. She can't be much older than 10, and her sweats and tea gave her away. I casually step over, holding a box with fun designs on them, and say, "Here, try these. See this big word? It means you won't be allergic no matter what, and that's kind of important." Her shy, red face lightens up with a little smile, and she says, "Thanks, miss," before darting off to tell a lady in nice clothes, and I'm talking about a woman's suit dress nice. This is important later. They were near the shampoo aisle, and she said, "A nice lady over there helped me find some of the hyperallergic ones." I waved at the curious mum, who smiled and waved back. As the daughter and the mum go off on their own, I notice a weirdly twitchy, ungroomed man following them. I think nothing of it, as who am I to judge relationships? Except, if that was Mum's boyfriend, this post wouldn't be here, would it? I'm getting ready to leave after looking for a toy for my son when I spot none other than the shy girl, who has a scrunched up, angry, sad kid face. I'm about to speak when I fully round the corner and see Twitchy holding Shy Girl by the wrist, hard enough that I can see the red mark forming from the corner of the aisle. I don't see Mum, and it hits me that this is not Mum's boyfriend, and Shy Girl is in danger. I dart over and snatch Shy Girl over to me, screaming in Twitchy's face. I said to him, "Do you know this girl? What's her name? Where's her mother?" And the problem is, Twitchy's got answers. I'm drawing a small gathering of onlookers now, and Twitchy is visibly more twitchy. He says,
"I'm her uncle, damn it. Now give it to me."
And reached for Shy Girl. I tossed her behind me, on full autopilot, ready to fight, and scream even louder.
"Well, describe what her mother is wearing then."
Twitchy freezes and starts muttering. After regaining his confidence, he hollers back with,
"Blue jeans and a shirt, just like every other normal person."
The crowd seems satisfied, and a few wander off thinking that this is a mistake. A Shy Girl starts crying though, as this guy is physically touching my chest with his, trying to get to her. I yell at the top of my lungs that he's a liar and a pedophile, and he screams that he's her guardian. Then, just as if it came from heaven, I hear a shaking, angry but calm mother tone saying,
"The problem with that is that I am her mother, and I've never met you before."
It was Mum to the rescue. I shit you not, my mouth flew open watching the beige-clad businesswoman swoop in like a gallant angel to rescue her offspring. Her finger is in his face and she backs him down like a savage animal. I could hear the deranged mum snarl from 8 feet away, clasping tightly to a child sobbing in relief, thanking me and praising her mother. The woman cleaved this man verbally, and security chased him out of the store. Sadly, he wasn't alone, so I was told, and made an exit. I gave Mum my number, and she came back to thank me and collected her daughter. If that woman had anything left in her, through her tears, she tried to give it to me. I've never seen a tiny 30-year-old woman heft and cradle a girl old enough to have PMS like that. So I told her the truth. I have a little boy, ma'am, and all I'd like to do is just get home to him. She seemed to wholesomely understand this. In the end, I didn't actually buy anything, and my card is probably still chilling in the toy aisle. I'll send my husband there later to get whatever I wanted, but for now, I'm going home, and I'm going to hold my son for a while. So, this happened a few years back to me, and it has to be one of the creepiest and most disturbing things that I can remember. Now, I used to live in a small house in the outskirts of a Mexican town called Durango. Not much to say about it. It was the worst place to live and was dangerous. I guess my mother just really wanted to live far away from my grandmother. What I recall about this place was a small hole or skylight next to my room that had 2 windows, one for my room and the other was for my mum's room. It was dirty and debris was laying on the floor everywhere, and I remember seeing rats and other animals in that place. So my bed was at the center of the room, and next to the big window, I had my wear box. All my clothes were in there and a few toys. I was little at the time, maybe 7 years old, and I was going to school, so we had to wake up early in the morning in order to shower, eat, and all of that. Regardless of the little time we had to get to the bus, my mum took like an hour to put her makeup on and dress and all of that. She did all of that in her room, and I guess she never foreshadowed what was going to happen during the week that a big part of my life changed. It was around 6 in the morning, and I was putting on my clothes when I feel like something just isn't right about the place. I think it would have been better if I had only ignored it, but for some reason, I looked to the skylight and I saw a shadow. I stared at it and I noticed that it was a squatted man looking towards my mother's room. My heart started pounding hard, and maybe it was because of the moment, but I couldn't see the guy's face at all. I started walking to my mum's room, though, to tell her this, and I remember her wearing underwear, and it was really uncomfortable because I saw the man just staring. So I just looked at her in the eyes and pointed to the skylight. She walked to it, and I think she must have saw the man too because she didn't say anything, like me. I really don't remember what happened next, but I'm pretty sure my mum closed the window shades and started putting on her clothes as fast as she could. We didn't own guns, and my mum was alone, and my dad left when I was like 3, so she called the neighbor who was my uncle, and he goes out to check. And there was a man, and apparently he was a pretty nasty sod because talking about him later, my mum told me that he was up there, well, yeah, you get the drift. But that's not even the worst part. A week later, we were with my grandparents, living with them until we found another place when my uncle calls her telling her that someone had broken into her home. She was obviously in tears at this point. Usually, she could withstand anything, but she was pretty torn apart by this. So, we went to check the place, and whoever entered the house didn't take anything expensive. There was some jewelry taken and some money, but the thing that made everything creepy was that my mum's underwear and pants were all over the bed, spread around. My mum used to be a model, so she kept some photos around in folders or whatever, and apparently the guy found them and took some of them. So some time passed on and my mum threw away her clothes and all of her photos, just keeping the ones that he didn't touch. We moved to my grandparents' house, and later she left Mexico and came here with me to start a new life. I think that this was a great decision too, given the circumstances especially. But before we did this, I heard rumors that the guy had been caught, and apparently he was a sex offender and a drug addict. We were lucky to have someone we knew next to us because I can't imagine how this would have played out or ended up if we had gone out there. My mum and I lived at my grandparents' house for a while, after my parents got divorced, so my mum could get back up on her feet. I have a plethora of paranormal experiences from their house, including waking up to my bed shaking and a ladybug-shaped piggy bank launching itself at my head. But the experience that sticks out to me the most is the night that I was unaware that I wasn't the only one in the house. My grandparents had gone out of town, and I had been upset with my mum because I was planning on going to my friend's house and I needed her to give me a ride there, but she couldn't because she was waiting for a date to pick her up, as she had started dating after a divorce. I was laying on one of the couches in the living room with my back towards her because we had just got done arguing when I heard her date drive up, late. I knew that she was annoyed about him getting there late and assumed that she was just going to go outside to confront him. I kept my back to the front door when I heard her come inside and immediately go into her room. I thought I heard her sniffing as if she was crying and got up to comfort her, but then I stopped because I knew that she didn't like me seeing her when she was vulnerable. Also, I was still a little bit angry that she hadn't taken me to my friends, and I thought it kind of served her right that her date was late. I know, I was a little shit as a teenager. So, I laid back on the couch and stayed there for a while, listening to her crying come to a stop. I was on my phone when, in my peripherals, I saw her head peek out from the doorway of the kitchen, but ridiculously low to the ground. I never turned to look at her because I assumed that she was trying to make amends between us in a comical way, and I was still upset. I eventually went back to my room to sleep, assuming that this was the end of it. The next morning, I went to her room to check on her, and apologize for being kind of a jerk, and asked how she was doing after her spat with her date. She told me that he made it up to her by apologizing and taking her out to a really nice restaurant, and that she had a wonderful time. Confused, I asked how long she was out, and she told me that she had gotten back rather late because they saw a movie as well. She had never come back inside, apparently. She had never even gone into her room and cried, and she never tried to make me laugh by peeking out from the doorway. To this day, I can't help but wonder if maybe, whatever it was, tried to lure me out by crying, and what would have happened if I had seen or looked at the doorway. I grew up in Salford, near Manchester in the UK, and we moved into what is a 2-up or 2-down council house in around 1990 and 1991. During that period, it was myself, my parents, and my younger brother. I'm not sure when the activity first started precisely, but I'm aware that it was within a couple of years of us moving in. My brother, from an early age, complained of being disturbed at night by an old man, and on several occasions would wake up and inform my grandmother, who would babysit of an evening whilst my parents were out, that the man had told him to wake up for school. As far as I knew, this was chalked up to bad dreams or a vivid imagination. However, the instances of my brother seeing this old man became more frequent and started to occur during the daytime too. My mum recalls a particular day when my brother dashed downstairs, visibly upset, telling her that the man was following him and was walking down the stairs. She checked the staircase, but of course, no one was there. It was around this time that she had her initial encounter with the old man. When vacuuming the living room, she described seeing a pair of legs in pressed, pinstripe trousers and a knitted tank top on the torso. She says that from the bottom, the apparition was almost like a living person that was stood in the room, but that it started to fade towards the top of the body, with the head and the face barely visible. She remembers throwing the vacuum in the direction of the figure and running through to the back of the house and outside. A few days later, she told our neighbour about what she had seen, and the neighbour was a little disturbed and told her that who she had described was the previous occupier, an elderly man called Fred. He had passed away in the house apparently, a couple of years after his wife. Fred was seen on several occasions shortly after that too, again by my mum and my brother, but also my grandmother. My grandmother told me years later of her experience, that she was helping my mum do some work in our garden when she saw an elderly man walk out of our back door and across the garden, vanishing as he walked. She told my mum about what she had seen, who in turn told her about the elderly man who seemed to be haunting the house. Although he didn't seem threatening, it really unsettled my grandmother, and coupled with my brother's encounters, she refused to take care of us at the house, and instead, we spent a lot of our time at hers. To this day, she isn't particularly fond of visiting my parents' house, in fact. From then on, though, sounds of walking around in the bedrooms, or on the stairs when no one was in or on them increased, and items disappearing or being moved around became a part of the norm, particularly for my mum. We did notice, though, that the activity was more persistent around summertime. My mum was, and still is, the person who witnessed the most activity out of all of us. Whether this was because she was in the house more or she's particularly sensitive, I'm not too sure. But I believe a lot of the activity can be explained logically, though. What is interesting, however, is that when our parents decided to move my brother and I into different bedrooms,
My brother seemingly stopped being disturbed by Fred, but my mum experienced more. I personally didn't experience anything until I was 14 or 15 years old, when in the early hours of the morning I heard continuous, almost deliberate footsteps around on the stairs and landing area. I remember waking up quite annoyed, believing it to be my dad having a restless night, and that all I wanted was enough sleep for school the next day. I called out for him to shut up and to go to bed, and the noise just suddenly stopped. No noise of feet returning to the bedroom or going downstairs, just complete silence. Around a minute or two later, my bedroom door flung open and hit the wall. I remember jolting up and seeing nothing in the doorway, but the sound of footsteps started moving around my room. I yelled out to my parents and dived under my blanket. My dad rushed down the landing, and the footsteps stopped just as he came into the room. I told him what had happened and that I was frightened. He didn't laugh it off or tell me that it was nothing to worry about too, but instead he told me to get in bed with my mum and that he would stay in my room for the rest of the night. I found out a few years later that this was a regular occurrence for my parents, constantly being woken up by footsteps on the landing and stairs, as well as around the perimeter of their bed. My parents seemed unnerved that something had started to disturb another one of their children. I'm aware that this is becoming pretty lengthy, but there's so much more to tell you guys, especially as we now have a younger sister who is having her own unusual experiences. I live in my own home with my own little family, and it seems to be spirit-free, but even to this day, I find I'm having conversations with my parents about the unusual activity happening in their home still. The most concerning so far has been that of a dark figure sat cross-legged in the corner of my brother's room around 4 or 5 years ago. He says that he felt like it watched him for an extended length of time, and that when he tried to ignore it, he could feel and hear tapping on the headboard of his bed. Eventually it became too much, and he vaulted out of the bed, past the figure that was still sat in the corner, and out of the room and vomited in the bathroom with fright. However, as a true show of masculinity, and the obvious need to get some sleep for an early start, he just went back to bed, endured the tappings again, and told whatever it was to fuck off because he had work in the morning. For the past few years, my 11-year-old sister has also experienced a lot of knocking noise around her headboard, similar to the ones that my brother experienced the night that he saw the dark figure. It's important to point out that these things are occurring in different rooms and on different types of headboard. My brother's one is leather and wood, and my sister's one is an iron frame. Since a youngster, she has preferred to stay in my parents' room too, but from the age of 7 or 8, they knew that they needed to get her out of that habit. So nowadays, my sister is initially okay with going to bed in her room, but she gets disturbed around the same time every other night by knocking sounds on her bedhead, and finds her way back into my parents' room. As far as I am aware, she hasn't seen anything unusual, but she definitely isn't keen on being alone in her room for long periods of time, and has complained to me in private that she thinks that something is watching her. My parents are reluctant to talk to her about what might be happening, and the family's past experiences, as my sister gets easily spooked, and they've asked myself and my brother not to elaborate on what she might be experiencing. But my mum has also recalled the following story a couple of times to me. I'm not sure if I believe it to be what she thinks it is, but I find it fascinating nonetheless. On the night my grandfather was dying, a little over 10 years ago, my dad had told me to come to the hospital with his siblings. My mum was heavily pregnant at the time and chose to stay at home and await the news. She remembers sitting in the living room watching television when she could hear knocking on the front window and on the front door. It was a knock that members of our family do when visiting our house, and my mum assumed that a relative had come over regarding my granddad and looked out the window to see who it was. But, as you probably have guessed, no one was there. She thought it was unusual, but brushed it off and went into the kitchen to make a cup of tea. And again, the noise of tapping on the window and on the front door happened again. But as she was about to see who it was, the noise of running came from across the landing and down the stairs, stopping at the front door. Thinking it was my brother and that something was wrong, she went to investigate, and there was nothing. She said that she had the most uneasiest feeling at this point, and that something felt very off. Shortly after this, my mum received a phone call from my dad informing her that my grandfather had passed away, and when she realized that he had passed around the same time the knocking had happened, to this day, my mum believes that my grandfather may have been trying to visit his son, and Fred wasn't happy about another spirit entering the home. Personally, I think that due to my grandfather's death, that tension and emotions would have been high, and that it could have been psychological on my mum's part. That said though, I really don't think that she would make it up. It genuinely unnerves her, even now, but it may have been her mind playing tricks rather than paranormal, I suppose. However, this is one of my favorite stories of unusual activity at our home, and it does make others feel pretty uneasy when we tell anyone. Anyway, there are many, many more stories, and I still find out new ones from years ago, even now. So I'll keep updating you of them, and any new disturbances. If anyone is interested, I'm more than happy to share a few more details of the supernatural occurrences of the house in the comments too, and I look forward to reading all of yours.
G'day mates, it's Busta here. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thanks again to the Hive members that bravely shared their stories for us all here, and I hope you guys are all doing really well. For the chance to have your story feature in a video, you can send your story to my email, which is in the description below. If you would like more scary stories too, you can click on the card at the top right of your screen or on one of the annotations on your screen right now. As always guys, it would be awesome if you could like, share, comment, and subscribe if you're new. Don't forget to follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for updates throughout the week. And also, if you would like content early and completely advert-free for as little as $1 a month, feel free to click on the link to my Patreon account and sign up there for regular MP3 format stories. Thanks again for tuning in and for all the love as always, guys, and I'll see you mates in the next one.